The Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company presents the Schlitz Playhouse of Stars.
I wasn't spending a whole lot of time at home when I first moved up there because I was so anxious to do a good job for the brewery. So I spent a lot of time on the road. I'd usually leave on a Monday and I'd come back home on Friday, and I'd work 2 or 3 markets every week. And when I worked the Tulsa market, which was absolutely the worst market that I had, it was pretty discouraging. So I didn't really spend a lot of time there. But it was a little bit hard on Judy, and it was hard on Debbie because, again, I had planned on us, being able to spend more family time and everything. And, of course, I kept explaining that, as soon as I get this market under control, then I'll be able to stay home a lot more. So we worked on that premise for a while. Chester Potts was the wholesaler I had in Tulsa, and he'd been a wholesaler for like 17 years. And according to what Jim Lowry told me, he got worse every year. So after 17 years, you can imagine how bad it was. But my other wholesalers, they seemed like they had a good attitude. I had a wholesaler in Bartlesville named Denny Cressup. And Denny had every brand of beer in the marketplace except Coors and Stag. And he only had a 19% share of market, which showed how bad business was for all the other brands except for Coors and in that part of the state, Stag. The Indians in that area preferred Stag over anything else, so that's why it had a presence. Down in Miami, I had a wholesaler that he was kind of an absentee guy. He spent all his time in his at the country club playing golf with his friends and goofing off. Down in Muskogee, I had a wholesaler that he'd only been in business about 8 months, Jack Livingston. And Jack and I became very, very good friends and worked together really well. And we accomplished quite a bit of things while I was working with him. And I had a couple, a husband and wife in their late 50s, I guess they were, in Krebs Market, which is where the state penitentiary was located in McAllister. And they were Italian people. His name was Kenneth Rippey. His wife's name was Linda. And he was kind of a 4-man show. He had 2 drivers and himself and his wife, and they did everything. And Kenneth was a good guy. He and I got along really well. And so that was a good place, too. When I went down to Durant, they were just changing wholesalers there. We had a guy in the other side of the state line from Durant that he had both sides of the state line, and the brewery decided they wanted a wholesaler to live in the state where he was serviced, so they made Chris sell out the Oklahoma part, the Durant part of the market, and his bookkeeper was Phil Scoggins, and he sold it to him. And Phil and I, he was a hard-working guy, smart guy, personable guy, and he was doing really, really well also once he got in the business. I had another guy named Don Lee that was a wholesaler in Ardmore, and I only made one visit on him. I walked in his market, and he had this big cage in his warehouse, and it said Lloyd's of London, which meant that he was buying the beer from the bank, and the bank was storing it in his warehouse. That's illegal. So I walked in there, and I said, "Hey, Don, I don't know you, but you're really not a legal wholesaler. You need to divest yourself of this, and I don't care how, but you just let me know what I need to do." And I left, and he sold out to the Lawton, Oklahoma wholesaler the next week, so I didn't have to worry about calling on him anymore. But anyway, so I had a good group of wholesalers, and I was enthusiastic about helping them. The Krebs market was kind of funny because every time I'd come to town, I'd work all day on the route, and then after we finished working the route, then I'd take Kenneth and we'd go out and make beer calls. And his wife, Linda, she said, "Gene," she says, "I don't like Kenneth spending money in these bars because when you're with him, we can say you're spending the money, but when Kenneth goes in there by himself, I'm not going to let him spend a lot of money buying beer for these people." And so said, "When you guys go out, you tell me how much money you're going to spend, whether it's $15 or $20 or something like that. And she says, I'll give you Kenneth's money, and then you spend that. And that way it doesn't look like he's spending any, but we don't want you to have to do this all on your own, so we're going to help you." So that was the kind of relationship I had with people like that. It was good. When I went to to Muskogee, work with Jack Livingston. Like I say, everybody hated the district manager they had before, a guy named Jim Riley. And so it was easy to make friends with these new people because they hated him so bad they figured I had to be better. And one instance that Jack told me about, when Jim Riley called on him, he called up and he said, "I'm going to come down. We've got to talk. You got problems." And so he drove down from Tulsa down to Muskogee. And when he got there, he said, the district manager, Jim Riley, says, "I don't want to talk in your warehouse. You may be recording what we're talking about, and I don't want this to be recorded. So let's go out and sit in my car." And it was wintertime and it was cold. So they go out and sit in his car, and Jim starts reading him the riot act about being organized and planning ahead and doing the things in the right order. And about that time, the engine on his car dies. He had run out of gas. And so Jack looks at him and he says, "Now you're telling me to plan ahead, and yet you're sitting in my parking lot and you ran out of gas. So who's planning ahead?" So Jack got out of the car, went in his warehouse, closed and locked the door, and let Jim sit out there trying to figure out where he was going to get gas so he could get back home. So, and then from that point on, and this happened several months earlier, every time Jim would call up Jack and say, "I want to come down," and he said, "What time are you going to be here?" And he said, "Oh, I'll be here about 10:30. And so about 10 o'clock, Jack could go lock up his warehouse and not let anybody in. And no district manager, he'd be out there beating on the door trying to get in. "I know you're in there. You got to let me in, and Jack never would answer the door. And so that was kind of funny. But like I say, I had a good relationship with all the wholesalers. And one of the things that Jim Lowry had told me, he says, "We've been trying to get rid of Chester for about the last 10 years, but nobody stays in this market long enough to put a book file together to show evidence that he is neglectful on a long-term basis. So when you get there, you start doing a book file immediately, and then we'll build on it until we get enough evidence, and then we can terminate him and get a good wholesaler in there. Until you get Tulsa providing a positive sales response, you're not going to have a good district." And so every time I'd go in the Tulsa market, I would always write up everything: old beer, out of rotation, no signage, pricing wrong, and first one thing and another, and start building that book file. Well, on the home front, again, like I say, I wasn't spending as much time at home, but when I did get home on Friday, I felt good about what I had done all week, and so I had nice, relaxing weekends and time to spend with the family, and so I enjoyed that a lot. I don't think Judy and Debbie appreciated it as much as I did, because again, I had plenty to keep me occupied during the week, and so it was a little hard on them, but like I say, I was trying to climb the corporate ladder and excel in what I was doing.